because a lot of people in this industry are very skilled, and they've been around for a good deal of time and seen a lot of things. So I don't think it's a bad place to be at all.
Yeah, I would agree with you. And you keep in mind too that I think the importance of different things in companies change over time. I think in the 90s and the early 2000 era, we were all talking quality, 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 and Six Sigma, and all these other measurable things that would define. But after a while, corporations and service companies, that became a given. If you don't have good quality, you won't even get in the front door. So I think other things now are more important to them. Not to say that quality and accuracy of their bills or accuracy of reporting, it's just those attributes have fallen a little bit further down. Other things have risen to the top. Um, and I think the firms that pay attention to what's important to their clients are the ones that'll be longer term more successful. My role is to maybe give them data that shows how the top dozen or 2 dozen service firms are doing on these same characteristics so that they can evaluate. I used to help companies write their RFPs and review proposals, but I haven't done any of those lately because I think people are using my report. It's, once it put me out of business. Just because I report it, they know and they know who's good or bad.
All right. Welcome to another episode of Relocation Leader. I'm your host, Zac Turbes, and today we have a very special guest. You have Alan Trippel, the owner of Trippel Survey and Research, LLC. And Alan has a very popular survey in the relocation space, and we want to invite you on. Thank you so much for coming on with us, Alan.
Well, thank you for the invite, and I'm looking forward to our discussion.
So we are here today to talk about the Trippel Relocation Manager Survey, which means a lot to different companies in the relocation space. And I was wondering if you could just explain kind of how you got into the industry, Alan, maybe what has been your place in the industry throughout your career.
I entered the relocation industry, believe it or not, in 1976. So that makes me one of the founders, literally, but figuratively maybe. But yeah, I began working for a relocation company at that time. I was hired to do methods and procedures, and the name of that company was Home Equity Homerica. 76 was a formidable year because it was the year that the federal government changed tax laws, which made it a tax deductible deduction for corporations to move people and to buy houses and sell houses. And that was really the beginning growth of the industry. Up to that point in the 50s and 60s, it was more just home finding services that companies were providing. But when the government did this, it really exploded the growth. Within years, all the major oil companies outsourced. There was this one company called IBM, which many of us know as the acronym I've been moved. They were 6,000 people a year. So it was really the growth of that industry began with the tax deduction. And I was hired by a small firm, like I said, and I was the 256th employee. And Home Equity Homerica today is better known as Cardus. So I was with them for about 20 years. I was recruited by a different relocation management company in the late 80s, and then recruited back by Home Equity Homerica, who by that time was called PHH Home Equity. And a couple of years later, through some acquisitions, they changed their name to Cardus. So I've seen the industry go through different types of changes, that being one of them. High mortgage rates in the early 1980s when mortgage interest rates were running over 15%. We saw the change in international movement when the EU was formed in 1992. That really exploded the whole international or global relocation industry as well. And there's been a lot of acquisitions and mergers over the years. I mean, as you're familiar, 2 years ago, this firm named Server bought one of its competitors. So the relocation stands for change, and I've always been interested in what changes were going on. I was laid off in '94 and from what was then PHH Home Equity. And I talked to a few of the clients that I knew very well through all my couple decades in the industry. And one of them was the manager at Johnson and Johnson. His name was Gary Garan, and he happened to be the president of what was then ERC that particular year. And I visited him in New Jersey, and I said, Gary, I don't want to get back employed again. Is there any services that might be needed by you or your fellow peers, the corporate managers? And without a second thought, he said, doing surveys. He said, we do our own survey, and our suppliers do their surveys, and they give us feedback, which was great. But we think it's a little bit biased. We're not sure that we're getting a true, accurate picture. Furthermore, all we're getting feedback was from the suppliers that Johnson and Johnson was using. So he went on to paint the picture that what corporate managers like him, need is really someone who could come up with some unbiased way of evaluating or asking my peers what they think of their service providers. And the most dominant one on his mind was the relocation management companies like Cardus, like yours, like dozens of others these days. How do their users, their managers evaluate their services? And he not only gave me this idea, he gave me some initial funding.
And you've been doing that ever since.
Yes, I have. Yeah, I've been very fortunate. I have a very supportive wife. So even through our lean years when we were struggling, she was supplementing our family income. We have 5 children, and now we have 10 grandchildren. She was supplementing my meager earnings and doing surveys and research. She was running a restaurant, and I was teaching night school at a MBA program in our nearby community in Connecticut. So it's been a struggle, but now it's gained some traction. We're really proud of what we've accomplished.
For those who haven't seen inside the survey, can you explain sort of what makes it unique?
Yeah, just to give a little further background, it's not the only one that I do. In the late winter, I do a survey mirrored after the one that we'll talk about extensively on the household goods industry. And then 2 weeks ago, I just completed one on international mobility. And in June, I'll do one on ancillary services, the mortgage providers, temporary living, destination services, things like that. But the one you're referring to is the one that gains the most, has the largest audience and best participation rate. That's the survey that I do in the fall on relocation management companies. And this individual from Johnson and Johnson gave me the idea, and over the years I've refined it. And what I do now is usually every summer I inquire amongst my database of corporate managers what attributes are important to you, and I list maybe 30 or 40, and they rank them. And those are the questions that I then focus on when I asked in this fall survey on how is your relocation management company doing. I use the top questions from that attribute earlier survey to really hone in on what might be the major focus of corporate managers today. When I send the survey out, it goes out to all 1,000 people. And if some people want to participate, that's great. Others may choose not to because they're too busy or they're on vacation or whatever have you. Last year, I got over 200, nearly 250 managers participate. So it's by far a widely known and accepted, and I think a pretty darn good metric for how firms like yours and your competitors in this really big industry is doing.
I wonder if I can piggyback off of a few things you said there. One thing has kind of boggled my mind a little bit, being in communications, is that you don't have a website that I know about. You're not super active on social media, and yet everyone who's anyone in this industry cares about how they did on the Trippel survey, and they
Yep.
really want to tout, even if they get one or two number one ratings. So, like, how did it come to be so
Correct.
trusted in the industry, given the fact that it's been so unconventionally marketed? Is it just that it's been a fixture for so long?
I think it has been a fixture for many years. I did have a website, but I found through the provider that I was working with, I was getting very little traffic. And being a small business owner, it just wasn't worth the investment in money or my time to maintain that. So I dropped that a couple of years ago, and no one's questioned it. Uh, I've never been a big believer in social media. Maybe it's my age and my upbringing. I still read hardcover books, and I don't do much in social media. So I think it's just been based upon a recognition that it's fair and it's unbiased and it spreads through word of mouth. Um, Pre-COVID, I was attending many ERC meetings and many regional ERC meetings, and even were invited often by providers of industry to come and speak to their client meetings or their forums or lead a focus group. So I think it's just through word of mouth that I've developed a reputation. My client list is, if anything, it's not growing anymore. It's probably shrinking a little bit because there's turnover in the industry. And unfortunately, one relocation manager who is leaving a job may not reference me to the new manager. And when I send out my survey, it gets shot back as being no such recipient. So it's a struggle, but word of mouth and doing a good, formidable business is, I think, behaving ethically too. I don't, you can't pay me off. I mean, I just do what I do, and if you don't like the results, you have to improve. And
Would you be able to give me sort of a rundown of the different categories in the survey? Like you said, you sort of poll the managers to see what they would like to include as questions in the surveys.
there are three what you call mainstay categories. Overall satisfaction, which I think is easy for a manager to assess on a 10-point scale, which is what I use. The two other mainstay ones are your willingness to recommend your relocation management company, and I grade that on a 4-point scale. And then the third one is, a year or two from now, do you think you'll still be doing business with this provider? And that, I think, provides myself and my readers and the people who participate a sense of, is this firm going to be my provider longer term, or are they just here for the short term? So those are the three mainstay questions: overall satisfaction, willingness to recommend, and continuity of services. When I do the summer survey asking what's important to you, there are a number of attributes that I call them that always are in the top 5 or 6. Always. I mean, they may change the one ranking one year, maybe number 2 the next, and 4 maybe come 3, but they are different. You would think that they would be very measurable, but these 5 or 6 categories are, and I have a list here if you don't mind me just reading them. Last year, when I ran this survey in the summer, the number one attribute rated of importance to corporate managers was data security.
Has that
Now, again,
risen much over the years?
that has grown in importance. In prior years, it was probably around number 10 out of maybe 25 or 30 that I list. But I think in this era, when we're dealing with phishing and scams and firewalls being broken and penetrated by some nefarious, stakeholders, the ability of a relocation managed firm to keep their employees' data and their own data secure and private has grown in importance. And last year it was number 1. I think the year before it was number 2. The second thing this past summer in the
Okay.
survey, and I'll be doing it again in a few more months, the second most critical importance attribute was integrity. Does this service supplier keep their word? Are they honest? Do they do fair business, practices? Third was quality service. Do they provide me and my employees a quality service day in and day out? The fourth one has grown in importance too, and the category is three words: culture, partnership, and fit. Does does my culture at my company fit with the culture of my suppliers? Do we have a partnership agreement? Do we work together, or is it always finger pointing one way or the other? A simple word is to say, does my company fit with my suppliers? Company, is it a good fit, almost like a jigsaw puzzle? Do we fit well together? The fifth most important one was the quality of the account manager. And this is pretty new. This was not highly rated in prior years, but what I've sensed is that the role that the account manager has at a supplier and their dealings with the corporate manager day in and day out, answering questions, figuring out issues, giving ideas, being strategic, has grown in importance to what last year was number 5 in importance. 6 was responsiveness. Is the relocation management company responsive, or do they just drag their butt and delay giving me answers, but are they quick to return phone calls and give me what I'm looking for? And the 7th one is an interesting category that I often have to explain. I call it service recovery. And I learned this many, many years ago, doing some research on quality. Clients will accept mistakes. We're human. We make errors. Our reports may not be 100% accurate. What someone tells me one day may not be the same that I hear a week from now. So we are human, and the corporate manager doesn't expect perfection, I don't believe. But they want to be darn sure that if my supplier is making a consistent mistake, that they can recover from that and put into place tactics or a policy or procedures that will eliminate that mistake going forward. So I call that service recovery, not only the ability to fix a mistake, but then to guarantee that it'll be minimized going forward. So those were the ones that I asked about in the fall survey. Now, based on 07 and many others that I'll get into, how satisfied were you with your supplier? So they'll rate quality service, they'll rate their satisfaction with the partnership they have, with how they perceive data security and service recovery and the quality of their account manager. So those are ones that I would expect when I send out this survey in the summer will still be very highly valued by the corporate manager rolling into the major fall survey. There are some interesting ones, though, that I have found day in and day out, year in and year out. I have met many corporate managers that say that my firm's technology is awful, or I can't get accurate reporting, or their mobile technology is pathetic. But yet, the 2 lowest rated attributes of importance to managers the past 4 or 5 years has been mobile technology and web technology, which I find fascinating. In this day and age, with all of us carrying smartphones in our pocket and walking down Main Street with a tablet in our hand, the ability of a service provider to provide top shelf mobile technology or even website technology isn't as important as many other attributes. So I'll continue to ask about that, because technology seems to be driving so many forces these days. But there are so many other factors that a corporate manager looks for in and expect from their service provider.
What it highlights is, you lean very heavily on the expertise of the individual managers to be able to tell you what matters most to them and who's doing a good job.
Yeah, right.
I think that's not a bad thing because a lot of people in this industry are very skilled, and they've been around for a good deal of time and seen a lot of things. So I don't think it's a bad place to be at all.
Yeah, I would agree with you. And you keep in mind too that I think the importance of different things in companies change over time. I think in the 90s and the early 2000 era, we were all talking quality, 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 and Six Sigma, and all these other measurable things that would define. But after a while, corporations and service companies, that became a given. If you don't have good quality, you won't even get in the front door. So I think other things now are more important to them. Not to say that quality and accuracy of their bills or accuracy of reporting, it's just those attributes have fallen a little bit further down. Other things have risen to the top. And I think the firms that pay attention to what's important to their clients are the ones that'll be longer term more successful. My role is to maybe give them data that shows how the top dozen or 2 dozen service firms are doing on these same characteristics so that they can evaluate. I used to help companies write their RFPs and review proposals, but I haven't done any of those lately because I think people are using my report. It's, at once it put me out of business. Because I report and they know who's good or bad.
Yeah, I'm curious, in your mind, do you see any attributes that are perennially underrated in your mind, or can you look out into the future and maybe see a scenario in which one of the attributes that is normally rated below the rest starts to creep up the list?
One answer would be, is my service company flexible? Are they able to design a system or put into place a procedure or that will accommodate the changing needs that my firm is facing? And I think that became a more important attribute and will continue to be important post-COVID. I think you had mentioned earlier that years ago I may have asked questions about COVID and how well are your suppliers managing to this epidemic and all the changes that firms are going through with hybrid work and people working from home. Have they been flexible enough and adaptable enough to meet these external changes? So I think flexibility or adaptability will become more critical. Something I became very aware of last week, I was talking to another firm, an executive at a service provider, and this person mentioned to me that in recent weeks, all their focus has been on real estate. I said, what do you mean? And he said, ever since that Burnett versus the National Association of Realtor settlement was announced late or mid-March, this person said to me, it's all I've been answering phone calls is how is my company going to respond to this or that, which again comes back to flexibility and adaptability. But this industry has always faced external factors that have caused you and the clients to turn on a dime or respond to this emergency. 3 years ago, it was COVID and a lockdown, and people were working from home and banging their garbage to thank, the healthcare workers. But I think now the industry, the big change that we'll see now will be how do brokerage firms, relocation management companies, corporations themselves and their transferees and assignees, how will they respond to these changes that are coming to real estate transactions? I don't have an answer, but in a couple of years, the next couple of years, I'm going to be studying this and asking in surveys a lot of questions about how your company is doing responding to the NAR lawsuit. In fact, I just launched one last week where I asked companies, what are you doing at this early stage? And I'm finding I'm getting an extraordinary response rate. And basically, relocation managers at corporations are saying, I'm throwing up my hands. I'm relying on my RMC to tell me, or my in-house legal team, or I'm turning to some other sources like Worldwide ERC. But there are people right now are scrambling how to handle this and what may become of the industry. So I think flexibility, adaptability, modifying what we do to meet the new environment will be very, very important in the years to come.
Nice. And not to ruin any more of your consulting business, but I was wondering if a relocation manager happens to get their hands on your survey, do you have any advice for how to read it? And
When I put together a survey and launch it, I don't put in questions that I feel will not help the corporate manager. And so some years I'll just eliminate a question because I'm realizing that it's not going to help your clients make better decisions, which is my primary target. So be sure to read page 2 after the cover page right through the end. I think too many service providers and even corporate managers might go right best to who are the best firms and who are the worst firms. But I try to ask so many other questions before that might give them ideas on how their industry is changing and how they, as a corporate manager, might be responding. And then get into the nitty-gritty of all those attributes that I try to cover. And a corporate manager has to ask themselves, what's important to me? And are there other suppliers that are doing better jobs or worse jobs that I should be aware of? For individuals like yourself and your employer, look at the trends that are happening, what things are occurring or not occurring over the long term. And be sure to ask your clients personally, since I may only get a couple dozen of your clients participate, what's important to them. I think that the onus of asking that question falls on every relocation management company, is making sure that you understand what attributes are important to you. One of the things I have found when I do that summer survey, asking managers to evaluate their important attributes, is a big difference between people who move 1,000 or 800 employees a year and other corporate managers who are just overseeing a program moving 80 employees a year. We'll put them on a domestic assignment. The needs of big movers are different from small movers, with the exception of those first 5 or 6. They're pretty consistent. But when you delve down, for instance, as an example, big movers are much more concerned about the quality of reporting and the quality of billing. And is my provider able to give me billing information right down to specific billing codes and departments or divisions? And is it accurate? So, small companies only moving 50 or 80 or even 110 employees a year, they just get their one bill and they're very satisfied as long as the bottom line isn't, growing astronomically. So I think it's important for management service companies like yours, your competitors, to find out from their clients what's important. And that's certainly one of the roles of your account manager or the equivalent at your company. What's important to you? What do I need to focus on to keep you satisfied?
do you have any good quotes, some good books, or any other influences that have helped you in your professional career and maybe that you want to share with all the rest of us?
Many, many years ago, early in my career, when I first joined the industry, I read a book I can't remember its exact title, but it's What I Learned in Kindergarten. And one of the quotes in there is, how does it go? Don't sweat the small stuff, and it's all small stuff. And I learned from that sometimes and I still do, I get stressed out over something that just isn't that important. It'll be gone tomorrow, or it will work itself out. And I think relocation managers have to think of that. I think all the service providers and all their employees just because I'm having a stressful day today because something didn't work as it should, or I failed to follow through on a recommendation or a commitment, don't lose sight of the bigger objective and don't get hung up and beat yourself up over small things. Um, I think the other thing is just the philosophy. I think it's when I was teaching graduate school, other MBA students for 20, 25 years, I was teaching a course on strategy. And what I learned that I'd like to share with your audience and those who listen to this podcast is keep in mind what's happening externally as much as you are internally with your company. When you think of this industry, and as I said earlier, it really began in the mid 60s in its growth period, but every few years there is some external factor that is really driving change. And be mindful of those, make adjustments to your own behaviors and the way you do business. And for corporate leaders or service providers, watch them. The 60s, it was the tax law changes. Early 90s, it was the formation of the European Union and how that opened up, global mobility. My wife used to work for IBM, and when IBM first said and announced their first desktop PC, people like her laughed. She said, "No one will buy a PC. It takes a room of enormous proportions and special air conditioning in order to make our mainframes work." So the industry is always undergoing change, and I think your employees at your company, corporate managers, have to be flexible, adaptable, and keep up with change, which requires education and maybe less focus on what's being said about them on Facebook, but read the newspaper and understand what trends are occurring. But don't sweat the small stuff.
And it's all small stuff.
It's all stuff.
Well, Alan, I want to thank you so much for sharing your insights. We really love your survey. Once again, that's another episode of Relocation Leader with Alan Trippel from Trippel Survey and Research, LLC. You've been a fantastic guest, and we've just really enjoyed having you.
Thank you very much, Zac. Have a good day.